Then she's got a category which should be near and dear to the folks in this room. She calls it the Facebook generation. According to her research, they are under 35 voters. They tend to be libertarian-leaning, educated, and informed, but they distrust government and will not register by political party because they think both the Republicans and the Democrats share the blame. You know anybody like that? Yeah? Does it sound good? Okay. Then she's got a category that has always been a challenge for me in elections. We have to come up with some clever ways of reaching them. She calls them the Starbucks moms and dads. According to Dr. Killian, this is the most unpredictable block of independent, unenrolled voters. They put their loyalty to their family and friends over loyalty to any political party. They tend to look at elections in terms of what's in it for me. They can be reached, but you have to be careful. When I got elected to my school board as the taxpayer candidate, I knew damn well I wasn't going to win if I went out preaching we got to get the hand on that budget and we got to cut the taxes. I wasn't going to win. I reached the Starbucks moms and dads very easily. I didn't scare them or threaten their children. I went after the superintendent's bloat in the administrative offices, and my campaign slogan was, budget from the classroom up instead of from the educrats down. And it worked. I came out number one in a field of 5 candidates for 2 seats because I didn't scare them. See what I'm talking about? You've got to find ways to talk to them on their terms. Now, I'm not taking away from little Johnny's classroom. I want to help you. But to do that, we've got to get our hands on the budgets. You can't afford it either, you know. And we use that approach. Now, the last category is the only one that we may or may not be able to reach. The 5th category that Killian has is she calls the ideologues. And she says this is a group of unenrolled voters on both sides of the political aisle. On the right, they tend to favor the rigid views of the Libertarian Party or the Constitution Party. On the left, they tend to favor maybe the rigid views of the Socialist Party and the Peace and Freedom Party. And they're primarily unenrolled because most states' ballot laws force them to be independents because the party they really prefer can't get on the ballot, okay? So I'm looking at that and I'm going, 4 of those 5 categories are reachable. On a retail level, we can reach those people and we can win elections. And a good candidate has to reach out. So if you study the beliefs of those people, what do you get? Most of them are libertarian-leaning to some degree or another. But they don't register by a political party because they're uncomfortable with hardcore ideologues. So you have to approach them cautiously. Okay? And sometimes, again, because we're the 24/7 political junkies, we talk a shorthand amongst ourselves and forget that most people out there don't even know what the issues are. Okay? I've written in my book, and I teach it in the campaign boot camps that I do, for an issue to resonate with voters, it has to have legs of its own before you bring it up. It must be widely discussed. It has to be easy to understand. And it has to reach the casual voters on their own terms. They'll listen to a message, for instance, parsed in terms of their own family budget or their own tax bill. But they start to lose patience when they start hearing a harangue on the evils of the Federal Reserve. See what I mean? That scares them. That's hard for them to comprehend. So to put it simply, and I preach this to all my candidates, if it's going to take more than a 20-second soundbite to explain, it is too complicated to use on a campaign. Period. If it's too new or not widely reported, it will scare people. I'll give you a good example I had last election. I had a congressional candidate, great guy, distinguished military career behind him. He had been assigned as a Pentagon briefer at one point in his military career. Nice image. And he came out early in his primary against NDAA. All right, now I talk shorthand. Everybody here know what I'm talking about when I bring up NDAA? Aha, of course you do. We talk shorthand, okay? Early in the campaign, he comes out in it, and it backfired on him. people started referring to him as a tinfoil hat. I got calls from liberty-leaning Republicans. Hey, how come Blade's speaking out against the Defense Authorization Act? He's a military veteran. And I said, well, aren't you aware what the issue's all about? Now here's his problem. This is why I say if it's not able to be explained in 20 seconds or less, forget about it. He came in early on the issue. The media had not been reporting about the civilian detention clause. In fact, it was so early, it wasn't even in the Fox News mantra yet. Okay? So, even though he was 100% correct, he lost the momentum by coming out with an issue which the voters didn't yet understand. And by the time more was known about NDAA, he was already trailing, had the perception of being a tinfoil hat. He now had to play catch-up. And his primary opponent, who was a totally non-ideological rhino, just let him twist on the tinfoil hat perception, and the guy won by 9 votes, 9 percentage points. Not 9 votes, not 9 points. Okay? So let that be a serious lesson. Ideological correctness does not win campaigns, it can lose votes. And we have to be very serious what the public's aware of. How many of you were watching the news last Wednesday, 3-4 days ago? What would have been the most significant story of the day to people in this room?
Internet tax bill.
Benghazi! Oh, yeah, there were hearings, weren't there? Huh? I was sitting in my local cigar shop, which is full of Republican businessmen, and we take the remote and we decided to test it. And we went through the dial. Well, let's see. Of course, we saw it on Fox News. CNN was reporting the hostages in Cleveland. Later in the day, as we were puffing our cigars down to the nub, everybody decided to report the boyfriend murder case out of Arizona. And suddenly Benghazi disappeared. So now John Doe, who's not sitting around all day watching the news, comes home from work, wants to be well informed, turns on the TV, and even on Fox News, what do we got? Greta Van Susteren. Oh, and she was just found guilty of murder, and Arizona law calls for blah, blah, blah. Or, and he held the 3 women hostage in Cleveland, and here's the police chief. That's what the public is getting in their brains. I did a test on that during the presidential race, because I find we are too close to it. I decided for 48 hours, I would not listen to any conservative talk radio. I would not watch Fox News. I would not go online and look at any conservative blogs. And instead, honest to God, it was the roughest 48 hours of my life. I watched Rachel Maddow. I watched Schultz. I listened to 2 left-wing talk radio, including one of my favorite wackos, Tom Hartman. I've been a guest on his show a couple of times. Anybody know him? He's the left-wing Glenn Beck. Lovable guy, full of loony ideas. What can I say? So I listened to Tom Hartman, I listened to Schultz on the radio, and I started reading all these liberal blogs. And I realized those folks are seeing the world completely different than the way we are. But now, the next part of the test, I highly recommend you do this sometime. The next part of the test is I went 48 hours without listening or watching liberal or conservative television, talk radio, not reading liberal or conservative blogs, and just looking at the mainstream media. Okay? I watched the local news. I looked at the local paper. I watched the NBC nightly news and all those. And you would be surprised what the average voter is finding out. Not much by our standards. But they vote, and they can decide our candidate's fate. And that's why I think it's important to realize that. They don't know what we know, and you can't preach to them. They don't want to feel inferior, and that's what it sounds like. Let me tell you about the federal reserve. Let me tell you about the Goldstein. You know, seriously. So you've got to talk to them on their terms, all right? And if you're a serious student of the political process, since I see some people in this room for whom he might be ancient history, which is surprising. I may be the only old man in the room here. I recommend you do a detailed study of Ronald Reagan's 1980 race against Jimmy Carter. Okay? Reagan was the conservative champion. That's what everybody thinks because of his reputation in our circles, all right? If you study that campaign, you will find that he cleverly emerged from the primaries when he got the nomination, and he shifted gears and ran a textbook, retail, general election campaign that avoided preaching issues. Go to the library, come on. If you sift through his speeches, his TV ads, and his brochures, you find little conservative rhetoric. He ran a feel-good campaign. One of my favorite ads was Morning in America. I don't see anybody here old enough to remember it.
That was in '84.
Okay, you remember Morning in America?
Yeah. That was
It simply
84.
personalized a visceral image, but he also did one in 1980.
Okay.
If you go to the museum, anybody ever been there? Great place. Yeah, you know the news, N-E-W-S-Zeum. The Newseum has a lot of these things archived. You'll find he had an earlier version in 1980 of the Morning in America.